Hey, well, good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Environmental Review Implementation Committee, or ERIS. This is a subcommittee of the Environmental Quality Board. I'm Sarah Stroman. I have the pleasure of serving as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and I chair ERIS. This is our first meeting since we had some new board members appointed. So I'd like to just take a moment and welcome Joe Barton and Rebecca Haug, who is with us online. Welcome to both of you. We're really glad to have you on this committee. Look forward to your participation.
Thank you.
We will get started by having our Executive Director, Kathleen Neuscher, call the roll.
All right, thank you, Chair. I don't believe Commissioner Arnold could join us, so we have Forrest Idbo from Commerce with us.
Yes, that's correct.
The board member Barton here.
Yes.
Commissioner Daubenberger
Here.
and board member Haug.
Here.
Here. Chair Holman.
Here.
Commissioner Kessler could not be with us. We have Assistant Commissioner Kolash.
Present.
Thank you. Board member Smith.
Present.
And Chair Stroman. All right, we do have 6 ERIS members. That is a core, our quorum is 5. I think, Chair Stroman, we have a couple of other EQB members joining us. I believe I saw board member Dingman listening in. And we were possibly expecting board member Larson.
I'm
Not just yet.
seeing her yet. Okay.
Are there any other board members who are not ERIS members joining us?
Board member Katzenberger.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
ERIS members, we have 6.
Okay, perfect. We have a quorum and we appreciate board members attending as well. That's always welcomed. Next on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda. This includes the meeting minutes from March 18th, 2026 ERIS meeting, and it includes our preliminary agenda for today, July 15th, 2026. So I would need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Approve consent agenda.
Moved by member Smith, and it looks like seconded by Commissioner Daubenberger. Any discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying what?
Madam Chair, when we have virtual meetings, we have.
Oh, that's right. We have to take a roll. Yep. Okay. Why don't you call the roll then, please?
I can do that. All right. Commissioner Arnold is not with us. Board member Barton,
Aye, or yes.
Commissioner Daubenberger,
Yes.
board member Haug,
Yes.
Chair Holman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kessler is not with us. Board member Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Stroman.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries. The consent agenda is adopted. Thank you, Director Neuscher, for breaking my old mayor habits. With that, we will turn back to you, Executive Director, for your report.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here at our meeting today. I know that there is a lot going on across the state and appreciate folks being here and being with us, and especially how many of you came in person and braved the construction and the fact that there's basically no road in front of our building. So I appreciate that as well. Logistics, you all know the meeting's being recorded. Our meeting chat is available. It's visible to everyone, but it is not included in the meeting record. So please only use that for logistical issues. If you have no sound or you cannot raise your hand or something like that. ERIS members, we've got 2 presentations for you today. We welcome your questions and feedback and input. If you're online, please feel free to use the raise hand function, or you can jump in. Board members should be able to mute and unmute yourselves. In these ERIS meetings, we do generally start with ERIS member questions and input, and then provide space for other board members as needed. And if you are virtual, if you can turn your camera on while speaking, that is helpful for us in the room. We're still working on how to get the technology in here where it can follow who's speaking in the room without making everyone motion sick. TBD on that one. If I don't think we have anyone in person, we do have sign-up sheets if anyone in person would like to make a comment. If you are online, there's an opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment, and you can use the raise hand button, and we will cue commenters at that point in the agenda. All right. Moving on to kind of the report, I really don't have a lot of things to report today with holidays and the sort of summer vibes and focusing on work planning it's really been what I've been doing. It does not feel like it's been that long since we had the EQB meeting, so there isn't that much more to say. A lot of what we've been working on over the last month has been considering and planning all of our work for the next year, and so you're going to hear all of that when we get to the work plan item, and I think we'll just leave it there and jump into the presentations. If anyone's got any questions for me.
Thank you, Executive Director Nuschler. Do any of the committee members have questions for our Executive Director? I am seeing none, so thank you. I think we will move right into our next agenda item. We are going to hear from Jesse Krasinski, our Environmental Review Program Director. He's going to give us a brief update on the rulemaking for gas resource development projects. And welcome, Jesse. I'll give you a minute to set up. My intro was not long enough. We know this is, I'll just say, we know this is a topic of great interest to folks across Minnesota, developing issue here with the interest in gas resource development. And I think as folks are aware, in addition to the EQB rulemaking process, DNR is also engaged in a rulemaking process. So we won't be discussing that today, but folks can just be aware that's going on. And I think I have bought Jesse enough time now.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everyone. I am Jesse Krasinski, Environmental Review Program Director with EQB. And today, like you heard, I'll be giving an update on the mandatory categories for gas production project rulemaking update today. I think I said update twice. That's okay. So I do see some new faces today, both in person and online. So I did want to make sure that we get a bit of a refresher on where we've been and what we're doing and why and all that fun stuff. And then I'll get into some of the things that really staff are intending to evaluate and continue to look at as we move forward in this rulemaking process, specifically when it comes to some legislative updates, as well as the end of the comment period now and the comments that we've received. And then I'll provide some next steps, things to expect it forward. And so with that, back in 2024, there was a legislative directive which identified multiple rulemaking considerations for a number of agencies, which included the EQB, to develop a regulatory framework for gas production, as this was a new industry in the state. And with that legislation, there were, like multiple arms to this legislation, which in addition to the rulemaking directions, included the work from the Technical Advisory Committee, or GTAC, which the DNR ultimately led and EQB staff participated in. Now, the GTAC work provided legislative recommendations from numerous agencies for the creation of a temporary regulatory framework that could exist while any permanent rulemaking processes were undergoing. Now, the GTAC process did complete in January of 2025, at least from the agency's perspectives, while ultimately the legislative bill that was crafted from those recommendations of those GTAC members did not pass, and therefore there was no temporary regulatory framework created. But following the completion of the GTAC process and then moving to the other arm of the legislation, which was the rulemaking authorities, the board ultimately then approved a resolution in April of 2025, approving staff to proceed with developing rules, permanent rules for mandatory environmental review categories of gas production projects. So within those bounds of the legislation and the board resolution, the scope of this rulemaking is really limited to the development of the rules for identifying when gas production projects must undergo mandatory environmental review. So ultimately, after researching and coordinating with other agency staff and tribal environmental staff, EQB staff did then provide the board with draft rule language in April of 2026 to review and approve staff to move forward with the rulemaking process and allow for the publishing of the notice of intent to adopt rules. Now, the 2024 legislation set a required publication date of that notice of intent to adopt rules by late May of 2026. So after receiving that board's approval in April of 2026, the staff then published the notice of intent to adopt rules on May 18th, which then commenced a public comment period, which has since ended on July 2nd. So with knowing sort of that timeline, and now that we've reached the end of our comment period, I did want to back things up a little bit further and start to discuss and provide a reminder of sort of what the rules for mandatory and categories really need to accomplish. I know I've shared this slide a number of times, but for the new people, you get to experience it for the first time and really enjoy it as many times as I shared it. I'm sure everybody else loves it too. So a reminder of what these rules need to accomplish. Really, the mandatory categories are all written very similarly when you look at the rules. They establish categories of actions for which environmental review must be required. So the rules must identify the projects where there is potential for significant environmental effects, indicating the need for an EIS, or environmental impact statement, and for projects where there may be potential for significant environmental effects, an EAW must be prepared. And a reminder that an EAW is to serve as the determination process for whether or not that project does have the potential for significant environmental effects requiring an EIS. Now, in order to accomplish these requirements, then development of rules for mandatory categories must identify those project types with a governmental action at which the nature or location of these projects identify the projects may or does have the potential for significant environmental effects. And of course, RGU is also identified, and my computer wants to restart. So let's pass that one later. Did the restart for now, so we're good. So with that reminder of the rules of mandatory categories, I did want to provide an example of an existing mandatory category so we can see sort of how those concepts play out in the actual writing of the rules. And I did provide a current mandatory category for EAW for non-metallic mineral mining. I didn't want to put the actual rule language, draft rule language for gas. I think this is just a more helpful example, as this mandatory category has a variety of categories within it, different project types, but also different RGUs and a repeat of RGUs. So we can kind of see that as an example when you compare this, if you have time, to the actual gas draft language. And so within a mandatory category, we define project types or variations of those project types. So within this mandatory category, we have the non-metallic mineral mining. And within these subparts, you see extractions or mining of peat, as well as the mining of sand and gravel and some other variations of those types of projects within these subparts. And then the rules go on further to identify the thresholds for those projects, for which then these types of projects align with either the need for an ES or an EAW, indicating the potential for significant environmental effects. Since this is a mandatory EAW category, these thresholds underlined here would indicate that these projects at this size or scope or location may have the potential for significant environmental effects. The rules often go on to identify, or always go on to identify, sort of this trigger or action which identifies the governmental action for which environmental review should be required. In this instance, we see development, the construction and expansion are pretty common examples as well. And then lastly, the RGU is defined. In this particular mandatory category, you can see both DNR and local units of government being named. Typically, the RGU is designated based on, for that project specifically, who has the most approval authority over that project. Certain other categories may indicate an RGU based on expertise in evaluating specific environmental effects. as well. So with that, I do want to get to a quick reminder of the things that the gas rules did propose for this notice of intent to adopt rules. And without providing the actual rule language, I did want to at least highlight the types or categories of EAW thresholds and the EIS thresholds. And so for gas resource development projects consisting of 5 or more production wells, an EAW threshold was proposed. So a reminder, all of these projects here would indicate that these projects may have the potential for significant environmental effects. Next threshold is regardless of size for gas projects that would be located in areas where the DNR rules are currently being drafted and going through the same process would prohibit or restrict certain activities. The next category or threshold was for any gas resource development project proposing to incorporate underground injection for waste disposal. And then the last EAW threshold was for any gas resource development project that is producing gas that is being created through the stimulation via underground injection. And then the one EIS threshold that was included in the draft rules that were published with the notice of intent to adopt is for any gas resource development project that is incorporating high volume hydraulic fracturing techniques. And again, this would indicate that these projects do have the potential for significant environmental effects. Now with that, I did want to take a minute to highlight some of the interestingness of developing regulatory framework for new projects and sort of the overlapping projects and timelines that we've noted or are ongoing for the rulemaking that we are pursuing now. Now EQB and Commissioner Strumman noted that EQB and DNR are proposing rules at the same time. Now, we have definitely coordinated and collaborated, but those are definitely separate rules. And they have their own publications and things that they follow. Now, they ultimately did publish the notice of intent to adopt on the same day. And the comment period also ended on the same day. But again, a reminder that those are separate rulemaking projects with very different authorities for which each agency has. In addition to those rulemakings, there's been some legislative work that has been ongoing. 2025 was mainly as I noted, the temporary regulatory framework, which none of that passed. However, in 2026, there have been changes from legislation that became effective in May 27th of this year. As a reminder, the EQB rules were approved by board, or the draft rules were approved to move forward in April. Were ultimately published on May 18th. And the legislative changes became effective on May 27th. And also Department of Health has been given new legislative authority and 2 years to make additional rules with that legislative authority that they've been given. And those would be to be proposed late May of 2028. So now that I did mention the new legislation, I do want to highlight some information for which staff will be evaluating and considering as we move forward with this EQB rulemaking. And so my next few slides are noting things that do have the potential to influence the draft rules as they were proposed and published in the notice of intent to adopt rules on May 18th. And so I do want to start with the legislation that was made effective in late May of this year. So there were amendments to the rulemaking directives, which are written in Minnesota Statute 93.514, specifically those that may have impacts or things that staff intend to continue to monitor and evaluate are an added requirement that any entity or agency that is adopting rules under that statute for which we are following then are subject to tribal consultation requirements under Minnesota Statute 1065. In addition to following the requirements of 1065, there was also an added requirement to submit a report on the process of, and the results, the process and the results of meeting those requirements of that statute. Now, there are also new additions added to statute 103I, which is a Department of Health statute governing wells and borings. In addition to this statute, included giving MDH new authority over those gas wells, which I noted previously on the last slide, and then directs Department of Health to make the rules for those gas wells and exploratory borings encountering gas. And then with this rulemaking directive to the Department of Health, there's also an added moratorium on the development of any gas wells until those rules are adopted. The notice of intent of those rules is required to be published in 2 years, so May of 2028. And so there will be a moratorium on development or drilling of new gas wells until those rules are adopted. In addition to the the rulemaking pieces, the moratorium, there are other pieces for which staff are evaluating for the impact on the draft EQB rules. And specifically, there are additions of definitions for gas wells, as well as hydraulic fracturing. There's also additional prohibitions that were enacted by this legislation. So specifically prohibiting hydraulic fracturing in a gas well, as well as prohibiting injection and disposal from a gas well. There are some exceptions to that. Specifically, if an EPA Class 2 injection well permit can be applied or granted, there are some approved drilling fluids that are allowed within that prohibition as well. Lastly, the legislation then limited the use of gas wells for the primary purpose of extraction and production of just helium gas, and also limited the location of gas wells to 3 counties in the state: Cook County, Lake County, and St. Louis County. I did want to add that while the primary purpose of extraction being limited to helium, it does allow for the extraction and sale of carbon dioxide if associated with that process of extracting and producing helium. And so with that, I want to get to the comment period for the rulemaking that we are proceeding with. Again, that went from May 18th to July 2nd. We did receive 11 submittals, 1 from Portage, and an additional submittal from the Intertribal Task Force on Helium Extraction, which included Grand Portage Band, as well as Boys Fort and Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. And then we also received some input from Pulsar Helium. We received a joint letter input from Water Legacy, MCEA, Cure, and Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness. Water Legacy also submitted an additional comment that contained comment letters from 199 members of the public. For the most part, those were just repeat comments. We did receive 1 emailed comment from Nature Conservancy, as well as 5 members of the public provided additional input. 3 of those 5 were actually a repeat from those 199 comment letters that were submitted by Water Legacy. Of the comment period input, things that's noted for which staff are going to continue to evaluate and decide how they may influence moving forward with the gas rules include conflicts with the 2026 legislative gas updates, specifically the ban on fracking and injection, the definitions, specifically of gas wells and hydraulic fracturing, as well as the tribal consultation requirement for following 1065. There's also input received on the location-based thresholds. There was some disagreement on sort of the approach of referencing the DNR rules that are not yet finalized. There's also input on the need for an additional tribal-based location threshold, as well as an additional vulnerable drinking water location-based threshold. And then there was a sort of a general input on the lack of EIS thresholds. And then the last theme here was the comments on the number of wells threshold wanting to be lower. There was input on the 5 number being too high, and some of the comments said lower that to 3 or lower that to any project requiring it. So now with that, I do want to highlight what to expect next. So I've sort of grayed out the things that we've already done and we can expect to see next will be where we are, which is at the response to comments. Now we do have sort of the uniqueness of also needing to evaluate and make any potential changes based on the legislation that has passed in 2026, not just the response to comments that we received. But ultimately staff is starting that process and will proceed with that process and come back to the board once we have made determinations about influence to the rules that need to change based on that input. And I would anticipate, we're anticipating coming back to the board around October for those approval opportunities for this rulemaking to then move forward to the next step, which is the ALJ review before the rules can ultimately be adopted. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Very helpful update. And I know we will look forward to hearing more about it at the September meeting when you've had time to finish processing all the comments and assessing changes. At this time, I'd like to ask for any questions that ERIS members might have for Jesse on the presentation that he just gave. If so, folks who are in the room can jump in or raise your hand, and folks online can use the raise hand function. And questions, Commissioner Daubenberger.
Thank you. And Jesse, thank you for your presentation and update. And would you mind going back one slide to the timeline, please? Yeah, so the response to the comments, you're working on those right now, right? And then I'm not sure if I heard correctly, are those coming then to the next EQB board meeting? So the August meeting, is that for review and approval?
Chair Stroman and Commissioner Daubenberger. So I don't think we have a plan at this point. It might make its way into an executive director's report of sort of a high level response to things that we're thinking about. But ultimately, it will likely be just sort of a package of looking at the response and looking at the comments, providing responses, and seeing how that then ties into any changes from the draft rules for finalized rules. I would anticipate it'd be more so of a single package rather than spaced out in multiple meetings, and that then would be, we're anticipating October.
Okay, thank you.
But I do think we'd probably bring it to back to you all in September first or more in depth.
Thank you.
Questions for members? Member Smith and then Assistant Commissioner Kolash can go next.
Jesse, thank you again as well for the presentation. I guess just a question, and I know you all have been coordinating closely with DNR as these concurrent processes are moving forward. While it's not expected, if there are any conflicting information that comes in during the rulemaking process, how does that get rectified? Is that agency level or does that come back to EQB? I'm thinking specifically, obviously we have our rulemaking, DNR has a rulemaking, now MDH is going to start their rulemaking process. I'm just, what's a deconfliction look like if there's issues or concerns?
Chair Stroman, Member Smith. Yeah, we will certainly be working as closely as we can with the DNR to make sure that we don't have any, I guess, misalignments with the rules, especially given that environmental review has to tie very tightly to the permitting realm of these sort of projects. So I don't know that there's an official way to do that, but we will certainly be working together and coordinating and making sure that those align as best they can. There is obviously some interesting wrinkles given that there are new rulemakings going on. So, but we will continue to work with both the DNR and MDH as those.
Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesse, for the presentation. And I have to say, the May 18th State Register must have been quite a read because we had two also highly anticipated rules in that State Register as well. So that one may be for the record, folks. But I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more about the comment that you had about the location-based criteria and the proximity to tribal lands. It's just what was the nature of that comment, how that was at least proposed, or what the criteria might be identified as?
Members from an assistant member, Assistant Commissioner Kolash. So it came directly from the tribal input, specifically looking for sort of a radius around tribal owned land and requiring an EAW for projects within that certain radius, just to protect tribal resources and that allowing for evaluation in that process. Can't remember off the top of my head the radius. It might have been 5 miles, I believe, is what the tribes had put in their comment letter, but I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to quote myself on that. But I believe it was within the 5-mile range of what they had proposed in their comment letter. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you.
Quick question about the legislative updates. You had mentioned some of the new requirements related to tribal engagement and or consultation, I guess should be is a more accurate term. Do you have any anticipation at this time in terms of how that will work its way into rule changes? Will there be new tribal engagement, or will it be more on kind of reporting and consolidating the tribal consultation that's happened at this point?
Member Stroman and member
Idbo.
So Minnesota Statute 1065 does not name EQB as a required agency to follow that. We do have our own tribal coordination and consultation that we did follow through the process. So I would say for now, we are going to evaluate to see if our process is compatible with 1065 and then see moving forward if there are things that we need to adjust or if we can continue forward with what we have done and continue that. We will have to for sure meet that reporting requirement as well. And so we did incorporate quite a bit of our tribal coordination that we've done to this point as part of the rulemaking materials. So we'll continue to evaluate that to see if what we have done or what our coordination and consultation aligns or how well it aligns with 1065. Hey, Catherine, if you want.
Yeah, I might just add, we had already planned to do additional tribal coordination, based on the discussion we had with the board in April. And so I think last week, Kayla sent out a scheduling request, and we're kind of planning, to walk through something similar to this. Okay, here's what we heard to make sure we have clarity, we understand the tribal content, tribal comments, and then do additional coordination as we proceed to bring this back to the board. So that has gone out, and we are waiting for the scheduling poll results.
Thank you. Any other questions from ERIS members? I'd like to offer an opportunity if any of the board members present have a question for Jesse. I know we had members Dingman and Katzenberger. I don't know if member Larson was able to join us, but feel free to raise your hand online if you have a question. I'm not seeing any further questions. I don't see any hands. So thank you all very much for the questions that did get asked and the discussion. And Jesse, thank you very much for the presentation and update. We'll move to our next agenda item, which is to look at our environmental review program work plan and some update report out on the continuous improvement work. So we have Executive Director Nuschler and Kayla Walsh, our Environmental Review Program Administrator. And I know you will run through the proposed environmental review program work plan and also talk a little bit about the continuous improvement with a focus on those items that are going to be addressed in the work plan.
Great. All right, thank you, Chair Stroman. Kayla was gonna run the slides for us. Thank you, Kayla. All right, so I'm gonna start by talking a little bit about our work plan, starting with our work planning model. Kayla, if you go to the next slide, please. So this is just like the general principle that we use. Our strategic plan sets the priorities, our work plan designates the projects that we're going to work on, informed by multiple sources of information. We have individual work plans that assign work to staff, and then we have project plans that set scope, objectives, and deliverables. And we do implementation and tracking via staff meetings, check-ins. I often mention projects during my executive director report and occasional reviews of the overall work plan. Next slide, please, Kayla. So we're going to talk through what we have for the environmental review program. We have the plates on here because if you've heard me do this before, I always want to make sure it's not like having a tiny cocktail plate at a buffet where you like all the food. That's normally what happens. We end up with too many pieces on our plate. So we want to have some input to make sure we have the right focus, that we're meeting the right needs, and that we're adequately considering EQB and partner capacity. So I'm looking forward to your input on these and also public input on this item or the gas item at the end of the meeting. Go one more, Kayla. The environmental review program work plan is really the key piece designed to support outcome 3 of our strategic plan that EQB maintains and improves Minnesota's environmental review program. So really trying to make sure that we are a valued source of information for anyone seeking assistance with environmental review, that we ensure that the program is meeting the objectives that are laid out in the rule and provides information that supports understanding the impact proposed projects will have on the environment. So we have strategies to support this outcome that involve guidance and training in general, guidance and tools and training specific to climate, pollution, and resiliency information, improved data collection to support our program evaluation, and then implementing updates to the rules and sort of operations to support program effectiveness. So in general, I think we tend to think of the work plan as sort of the projects we will take on in a given year. But the environmental review program, of course, has a lot of ongoing work, which includes general program administration and technical assistance. We're also working to integrate some of our prior projects into our ongoing work. In the past couple of years, we've added a focus on regular training to support technical assistance through Environmental Review 101 trainings, climate calculator trainings, information on how to use our online submittal service, and we are working to continue all of these things. We've also had some big improvements in our data availability and our use of data, adding data and incorporating it into the way we understand and evaluate the program. And we're working to make this much more regular part of our work with things like our dashboard, tracking processes and timelines with surveys, tracking our provision of technical assistance through surveys, and better tracking what kind of questions we get from the folks that call and email us. All right, next slide. So we then have projects that we want to take on. And over the last 3 years, we've done a lot of work to update and add to the general guidance that we provide about environmental review, with hoping our technical assistance can catch the more specific questions, and our guidance and tools are providing a lot of that baseline information. Our most extensive guidance documents are really large PDFs on our website from 2010 and 2013. So they are a little out of date, though there are some other supplementary materials. And we've been working over the last 3.5 years, to make the guidance more web-based, so it's updated and accessible, and so we can continue to keep it updated so it doesn't end up being 15 years old. So in this area, yes, and this is our mascot, is the cat with a ball of yarn, because every time we pull on something, we find another piece that gets attached to it. So that's the mascot for our guidance project. Kayla, if you click again, he will slide away so we can look at the detail. All right. So Kayla's continuing to work on guidance and best practices to support RGUs in effectively recognizing tribal resources and engaging with tribal nations. And that's really focused to our local government implementers that are not subject to 1065. Stephanie and Kayla are continuing to work on updating the guidance for climate assessments and EAWs to reflect the new climate calculator and some of our learnings over the past few years of implementation. We completed guidance for folks that want to submit petitions for environmental review. And I think we saw earlier this year that's been very successful in decreasing our number of incomplete petitions. We want to take on part 2 this year of that project, which is guidance for local RGUs and evaluating petitions. So Sarah and Sophia will be working on that. We think that'll be really helpful to those folks to know, have updated guidance on how to look at a petition and what their options are for decisions. Sarah just recently completed and we launched updates on the general AUAR, or Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review guidance. And she's going to be moving on to making updates to what is called the recommended content and form for the AUAR. That's based on the EAW form and it hasn't been updated to line up with the recent updates, well, the 2022 updates, the EAW form. Our general EAW guidance has mostly been migrated to the web, but part 2, really at the request and in discussion with the agency representatives, has been to update what's called the item by item guidance. So it literally goes question 7 of the EAW. How do you answer that one? Question 8. So the numbers don't match the current form, so we need to update that, and we want to put that on the web as well, extracting it from the PDF where it's currently hiding. And then finally, we need to review and make web-based our EIS guidance. In doing this, we're also going to add the additional language to support the new scoping requirements that allows scoping without an EAW, now based on the discussions that we had with the board when we implemented that legislative directive. So we thought, I think originally I thought, oh, we'll just do a scoping piece. And it's like, no, again, we pulled on that thread and we're like, oh, it's part of this whole EIS guidance that's buried in this document. Let's bring all of that up to our web base. So this is kind of the key, the key chunks of our guidance that we want to work on this year to continue to get those resources up to date and make them more available and more accessible. Next slide, please, Kayla. So we have also been looking at the EAW form. These are some of our other projects. We've been looking at the form and reviewing the formatting of the Word document that is that basic EAW form. We want to modernize it and be able to improve some of the accessibility and the readability and also the clarity. Our goal with this is not to include substantive content changes, but we do want to point people to the climate calculator for the appropriate questions and also potentially make some updates in areas where we think the instructions are not clear or not well understood. So we know the form is really important. It's a key part of the program and we don't want it to change every day. That's not helpful for anybody. So we're keeping that in mind and working with our partners on that, but hoping to get slightly more accessible version of that out. Obviously, rulemaking takes a lot of our resources. Jesse just spoke about the gas production one that we will be working to move forward. I also, once that is done, would like to consider us moving forward with considering what we call housekeeping updates, which generally is just minor updates to get rid of outdated language, outdated references. There's references in the environmental review rules to committees and groups that don't exist anymore. There's things like that. So we just want to clarify some of those things. When EQB has done this in the past, they kind of start with a list of things that they might do. I think looked at some of the rulemaking documents from 2005 and they're like, here's the 50 things. I don't know if we have 50, but we have been compiling the list and would like to consider in the second half of the fiscal year moving forward with the first stage of a formal rulemaking process, which is called a request for comments, where we just say, hey, here are some of the things on our mind. Here's what we want to accomplish, and ask for input on that one. So on our mind, but we would just be stepping into that. Of course, as we talked about last month, we would like to move forward with considering health impacts in environmental review. I think we tried to spell out in the memo to you all kind of what we think those pieces are as we start to put our toes in the water of that piece, to really look at developing, I call them organizing concepts for like the potential definitions of health from in a range of scopes of types of health impacts, to help us understand what is being included in environmental review documents today, probably also looking at some public comment processes to understand what's being requested or what the public is interested in seeing in environmental review, doing some evaluation and having some conversations, and again, like getting some foundational information, updating that 2012 report to help us move forward. So it's the project for next year is very much a first step. And then following up on our discussion with the board when we were proposing, when the board approved the proposal of the gas mandatory category rules, there has been a lot of discussion about the program updates to reflect tribal sovereignty. Many of the rules were drafted long before we had 1065, before we had some of those requirements. And we've received a lot of input on various pieces. So we would like to spend some time working with our tribal government partners and asking sort of what their goals and objectives are for the program to better reflect tribal sovereignty, to go through some of the ideas that we've received from them and from others. And then later, probably in the second half of the year, bring a discussion forward to the board members on what we're hearing. And then the last piece, we do have a large legislative report that's due every 3 years. It's called the Mandatory Category Report. It is not due until December of 2027, but we're going to have to start planning it in early 2027. That is sort of EQB managed, but it is assigned to multiple agencies, to EQB, MPCA, DNR, and MnDOT. So that's our list of projects. We do arrive at the projects through multiple sources, through conversations with tech reps, which really identified the high need for the item-by-item guidance, through the board discussions, which, as I noted, identified the need for the EIS scoping guidance and some of the tribal conversations, and then through the technical assistance, which I think has really led us to this idea that the RGUs need some petition evaluation guidance. And then, of course, one of the things that also informs us is the continuous improvement process that was designed in 2023 to help identify and prioritize environmental review program changes. So Kayla is going to talk a little bit about that process, what we did this year, and what we heard.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a member of our environmental review team here at EQB and led the continuous improvement, or CI, process development back in 2022. So I'll share a bit more about what those process steps look like and how CI relates to our annual work planning. The goal of our continuous improvement process is really at a high level to organize and keep track of ideas to potentially make the environmental review program more effective. Effectiveness is something the rule directs us to assess. Back in 2022, ERIS did discuss developing a CI process to help us make program updates in a very strategic, transparent, and efficient way. And this was identified as a need because there had been several reports and public feedback sessions throughout the program's history, and we needed a way to prioritize and keep track of all of them. The goal of the CI process was to set out to create a comprehensive list of potential program changes and a way to evaluate how effective those program changes could be. So in 2023, staff began with the steps in the chart here by researching all past recommendations, hosted a public engagement process, and created the CI steps collaboratively with tech reps, ERIS, and the board. During that engagement with tribes and stakeholders, we asked, what does an effective program look like, and what ideas do you have to improve the effectiveness? And that helped inform the criteria for effectiveness that I'll touch on later. And it helped us create a list of ideas to improve the program. The board has since committed to doing that solicitation of new ideas for improving the program every 4 years. And we look at those CI ideas before proposing a draft work plan each year to see if we can add in any CI concepts or components of CI ideas into our work plan annually. Overall, we're working to keep those key results from the continuous improvement process front and center because it's a great way for us to think about program effectiveness and to keep that ongoing list of potential improvements visible and maintained for any future work. And when I talk about the CI process, it's really these steps that the board has approved, and I'll go through these on the slide. So every 4 years, starting with this year, we'll solicit ideas very broadly, asking for new improvement ideas, and then EQB staff combine similar ideas and remove any if they're outside our scope of work. Next, EQB staff then evaluate which ideas would increase program effectiveness using a matrix that I'll show in the next slide. And that tells us which ideas are likely going to improve the effectiveness of environmental review overall. After that, EQB staff look at our existing work plan items and we see which of those continuous improvement ideas we have room for on our annual work plan. We recommend those CI-informed projects and we plan for what it could take to implement them. Part of this includes sharing CI results and checking in with tech reps, especially if EQB staff are considering recommending any ideas that would really require big changes or a lot of time or effort collaborating with other agencies. And the last 2 steps are sort of what we're doing today. We're seeking ERIS feedback on our work plan and then board feedback and approval for our annual work plans. This slide is meant to provide some more insight into that the scoring step. So this matrix was designed and used during the 2023 build out of the CI process when we asked for public comments back then. Folks generally said an effective process needed to have these 9 components. They happen to align really well with our ER rule objectives that say environmental review is meant to provide usable information, engagement, and process efficiency, avoiding duplication. So everyone on the EQB environmental review team, we look at all of the continuous improvement ideas and we award points based on how that idea could improve scientific integrity, environmental protection, and so on. And scores are based on that idea being fully resourced and successfully implemented. So we do not factor in any potential logistical constraints at that point. The big advantage that commenters had this year as compared to the initial 2023 process is that we now have these available. We know our scoring rubric here. People can know that before submitting their ideas. And we asked respondents to tell us this year how their idea might pertain to these criteria as well, which I think really helped us to receive some focused feedback. To give you an idea just how this played out since 2023, those initial submissions informed our work plans each year after 2023. So that CI feedback related to our work plans for climate calculator work and guidance, adopting our tribal coordination and consultation policy, improving data access and management, and also updating our guidance and providing trainings. And I also think it's worth noting just that our feedback in both 2023 and this year emphasized the importance of considering health impacts in environmental review. And that's a part of the reason why we're looking into that topic. So that's the context of 2023's designing and first run through of continuous improvement. And now I'll share some of the outcomes from this 2026 solicitations and scorings. The memo goes into more detail on this, but here are some of our highlights. EQB received 92 ideas from 42 different individuals. Almost all of those commenters self-identified as members of the public, petitioners, or members of non-governmental organizations. Most commenters said their idea would improve the process objective, so that includes consistency, quality assurance, and accountability. And they could select more than one, which is why these percentages don't equal 100. And then lastly, the memo shares more about this and some examples, but we did see two major themes in the feedback. First, a lot of folks suggested that there be some more nimble or reactive form of appeals outside of the courts process, or some form of oversight to really ensure the process was followed correctly and the quality of the reviews are sound. Second, we heard a lot of concerns over data centers receiving the right level of review. And we know that this is an ongoing area of interest with a lot of nuance. And so we're working with our interagency partners to continue building our understanding and our resources related to data centers. So as an example, staff published a frequently asked questions document on environmental review for data centers, and we're continuing to provide technical assistance on that front. This year, we also asked commenters to identify what sort of area of work their idea is seeking to improve. And you can see it was a pretty wide spread, but a lot of people said that their ideas pertain to EAWs and EISs, which align with that process category. And then also with mandatory categories, because a lot of the ideas related to creating a mandatory category for data centers. So after we received all of those submittals, EQB staff combined the 2023 input with the new 2026 ideas. We scored all of them using that effectiveness matrix. The memo has those results starting on packet page 18, and we are sharing the top scoring ideas across all 9 criteria, and then the top scoring ideas per each of the 3 objectives. The 2026 CI process results really did help inform our proposed work plan, and we updated the continuous improvement compilation of ideas document, and that's hosted on our webpage, on our CI webpage, and it lists each idea that staff scored this year. Overall, a lot of the ideas that ranked pretty high this year for effectiveness were very big ideas. In the sense that they would take a lot of time and effort and intentionality to really scope out well and implement meaningfully. And they would require a big lift, probably a bigger process or rule change. Since we're already taking on kind of an ambitious chunk of work with evaluating health in environmental review this year, we're not recommending taking on another discrete CI project, but we are using this year's CI scores to help inform and tailor some of our ongoing areas of work, including guidance and training, focusing on tribal relations and acknowledging tribal sovereignty in our practices, and with considering health. So, for example, one high scoring idea was for environmental review documents to include an assessment of how projects might disproportionately affect Indigenous people and communities in environmental justice areas. And that concept aligns with and has helped inform the work that we're planning on doing with tribes and our work in evaluating health concepts in environmental review. And I also want to mention we are very, very grateful for all of the feedback that folks have provided to us during the CI solicitation this year. And those ideas will be maintained in that compilation document on our website so that we can refer back to them in future years when we're considering our work planning. And so with that, I will turn it back over to you, Catherine, to share more about that full body of our environmental review that work that our team is looking to do this year.
Great, thank you so much, Kayla. As I noted, right, our proposed work is really informed by information from multiple sources. I think, you know, as Kayla noted, we got a lot of continuous improvement ideas in this solicitation that will that's now an every 4 years process. So we have this list now to look at. And I think not just for its specific ideas, but also for sort of what is the interest of the people who are commenting in a big picture. So certainly I think a lot of what we have in the work plan is responsive to some of the key themes. I think a lot of the questions about oversight come from like, are documents being done well? Are they being done right? Are they including information and things we can really support with guidance and training. Overall, we do have projects and ongoing work that fulfills each one of our strategies for our environmental review program outcome in the strategic plan. And we'll be working as we plan to be mindful of our resources and shared resources. So Kayla, if you go to the next slide, we just laid out kind of the different things and how they fall into the different strategies. Obviously, we are putting a lot in the strategy one, the guidance and support for project proposers, RGUs, and others in understanding environmental review. That's really, I think it's something that we've seen over the years is from multiple sources of information, technical assistance, continuous improvement, discussions with RGUs that it's really needed. So putting a lot of energy in that bucket. And then with the rulemaking and some of the health impacts, a lot of stuff in that program review and updates in strategy 4. So it does lay out across something to support each area. And then next slide, please, Kayla. One of the things that we are working on internally this year is doing a little more intense project planning on each of these pieces. I think in past years when we've shown you timelines, they've been Gantt charts with lots of bars, and they're a little complicated to follow. So this is just, it's a very, very preliminary idea of how we may lay out internally for ourselves and for our partners kind of some quarterly timelines of what's coming in each of these projects and in each quarter. To help clarify our expectations and our needs for interagency review and discussion and to improve our timelines and time management. So I don't anticipate that the board members will see quite this level of detail, but I just want you to know it's one of the things that we're thinking about internally and how we do our work. So I would love your inputs and thoughts on what we're proposing for the projects, environmental review program projects. Kayla, do you maybe want to go back to the guidance slide as sort of that's the big buckets of work. You can leave our mascot cat off that slide, but if you want to go back to that one, we can look at that. So I'm interested in your input. Next month we will bring whatever we put forward from this and the rest of the work plan to the full board for approval. I do expect to put some more timelines in that document, not at the level that we showed here, but some high level timelines for you all. So I'm happy to take input or questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Kayla. I think one of the things the board had asked was to help see a little more clearly the connection between the continuous improvement input and the work plan. So I think we received some good background on that process, and then also the link between those two. In addition to this slide, I just refer folks to the part of the memo that outlines the EQB staff recommended FY27 ER program work plan. There's the categories of the day-to-day work, the ongoing projects, which the guidance is, as Catherine noted, a significant part of that. And then there's the new FY27 projects. So that is going to be the focus of our questions and discussion here as ERIS, as our executive director noted. This is our opportunity to review that and make comment before it goes to the full board as a work plan to be adopted next month. So at this point, I will open it up for questions from ERIS member or comments about that work that staff has proposed for FY27 environmental review program. Commissioner Daubenberger.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of good work to be had here and done. And Catherine, when you were going through this slide in particular, it sounds like, well, the first bullet, that's developing guidance. But these others are more updates, and making them, document accessible, standard documents, cleaning them up, getting the references up to date, and web-based. But really it's not creating like for the guidance, not new guidance. It's not overhauling it. It's really more updating and clarifying existing guidance, just checking my understanding.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Dauberberger. I think that is largely true. The AUAR guidance, as I noted, the content and form doesn't include the 2022 climate edition. So it aligns with the rest of what we do, but that is probably a decent change to that one. I think with the EIS guidance, like adding that scoping piece and how do you scope without an EAW based with the new rule is probably like the most substantive change. The item by item, I do think is pretty much just is mostly alignment. We'll see as we get through it if we may find things that we're like, oh, that's maybe not the way things are perceived anymore. But I do think those are kind of the major changes. So yeah, a lot of it is just a review and putting it on the web.
Thank you. I know there was a concern among
Yeah.
agencies about a lot of work that's been done already that's still valid, that they don't want to see just go away and have to start from scratch. So want to make sure we're on the same page there.
And that's part of what we're trying to document in the project plans too. Like, here's some of the big things, and then we're going to go through and here's where we check in on whether there's more big things. Did we find something we weren't expecting?
The pulling the yarn.
Yes, exactly. What happens?
Thanks.
Commissioner. Other questions or comments on the work plan? Post work plan. Okay, Member Smith says she has so many.
I will try to
But
keep.
she's going to focus and yes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Sure, I appreciate that. So yeah, thank you for these updates and laying out what the rest of this year in FY27 is going to look like. I guess we're in FY27 technically. So guidance, absolutely. Those updates are going to be so relevant. And for full transparency, I do this in my civilian job. So it's something that I'm seeing and reviewing regularly, but I'm going to try to stay at that policy level for today's conversation. And really, as those updates are made, I know there's some clarification coming into play that you just mentioned, Executive Director, that like for the AOAR specifics on climate, et cetera. So absolutely needed, wanted, and can't wait for seeing what that looks like to provide comments and feedback as we move forward. A couple clarifying components, and maybe this is something that would come into play as we are reviewing those specific guidance opportunities. But when you're mentioning the tribal resources guidance for local government units or that local level, you know, there's already some guidance at the state level with that consultation process. So I think that's fairly well understood. It is very not well understood at the local government level. So I think that will be absolutely instrumental to identify required, recommended, or like a guidance style. Then if that can get clarified, I think that would also really benefit those local government entities that are facilitating these processes. So obviously required when regulations are applied, et cetera, but there's some gray area between required and recommended and when is it, okay, we better see this or it's not moving forward kind of a thing. So I think that would be very beneficial. And then I can pause if you need to respond, or I can keep going.
I think I'd like to just say, Kayla has been working on that one for a while, and I don't, but feel free to let her add. You know, there are so many, because of the nature of the program as a delegated program, as you know, a lot of the decision about what fully is required is up to the local government. So I think we are in general viewing this as much more of a sort of best practices guide. Kayla's nodding. I think Kayla's nodding at me. You know, because it is up to those local governments on what they want. Any RGU, right? It's up to them what they require. So I think that's more of how we're considering it. I know Kayla looked at some other guidance. Kayla, do you want to add anything or?
Yeah, I can just add it's generally a case by case basis, but we can work through it together and that the guidance can provide some good lanes and resources to check in on to apply to your scenario. And then we're always available for those more detailed questions for each scenario. So I think the guidance will provide a good starting point for having those conversations and sort of when to err toward coordination and how to do that and who to contact.
Thank you for that. And then I think as we're leaning in on the public health evaluation, just going that direction as that comes forward. Again, getting into those opportunities where what can be regulated and mitigated versus what can't. Like there's a lot of information out there about public health effects from fill in the blank project. And of course, data centers are the hot topic right now. So that's coming up more and more. But when we're talking about behavioral health impacts versus physical health impacts versus environmental health impacts, I think it's just going to be an interesting conversation as we continue looking and diving into those components. And then lastly, I think because data centers do keep coming up, it was one of the primary themes that came out from the CI process this year. Obviously, that's not identified as a specific recommendation right now that I'm seeing, but there sounds like continued interagency partner opportunities, a lot of additional work coming in. So I think just continued updates around that process would be really beneficial. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
You, Member Smith, good comments. Member Barton.
Thanks, everyone. So I understand this is my first ERIS meeting, so there's been discussions that I have not been part of in past meetings, but your last point there, Angie, was kind of my main one, was it does seem like, it's data centers were one of two main themes that came out of this public input. So in an effort to make sure that, we as a board are responsive to public feedback when we ask for it, I guess I might have thought that might have been highlighted a little bit more. So I guess I was just looking for a better understanding of how do we keep that? How do we make sure that we're not falling behind on that we are keeping up to date and doing what we could do? So maybe a better understanding of what it is that we could do as a board, short of, not having legislation directing the EQP maybe yet to do anything. So are we waiting maybe for legislation? Are we kind of in a holding pattern? And how could we make sure that we are responsive to that large concern of the public, I think, in our processes?
So thank you. I could talk a little bit about that. We did publish the sort of frequently asked questions and sort of the how might data centers fit? How might they be considered an environmental review? Give some guidance there. I think the increase in the use of AUARs and has really led to our focus on updating some of that guidance as well. We also participate with Minnesota Business First Step, which was it 2025, was sort of given the direction to coordinate a lot of work on data centers and have helped them put together regulatory guides. And Sarah is a member of the data center work group. I think also, and this maybe goes back to Commissioner Daubenberger's question about what other things might be in the guidance. We are watching the lawsuits. There's a lot of lawsuits on data center environmental review to see, and obviously once it happens, we'll review it, consult with our lawyers, but to see if anything the court says might become things that we should recommend as guidance. So that's some of what we're doing. There's been one court case, and I think we looked at it, this is a pretty standard kind of court decision on environmental review, but continuing to look at those and see what they bring forward. So that's some of the work that we're doing.
And one thing I might just add, I think, it's not necessarily a work plan item, but I think as the landscape continues to evolve through whether it's, legal precedent, whether it's the data center work group that many of the agencies are participating in or legislation, just providing updates at the EQB board meetings, which, we did a number of times last year, I think is helpful. I think it's less defined, like what is the project? And that's why plan, but I think certainly the information sharing and keeping folks up to date is something that outside the work plan. I'm assuming Commissioner Daubenberger is chair of the EQB as a whole. That would probably be something we could put there. Even beyond the environmental review components of it.
Yeah, if I could, Madam
Yes.
Chair, I agree when we brought that to EQB as kind of a update of all we've been hearing on data centers there. I think it was well received by board members as far as being informative, and then we did have quite a contingent of and online showed interest in that too. So bringing that back at some sort of a some interval, I think would be good.
And yeah, I would also just add to, I understand that some of these items are, they're work plan items that predated the data center, issues. So you want to work on those things that have already been initiated, and you only have so much capacity in your staff as well. So I understand that. I just think it's such a timely and time sensitive topic that I wouldn't want to, miss the train on it or miss opportunities or be doing something or not, we're not doing something that we could have done, for example.
Thank you for your input. Other questions or comments from ERIS members? I'll also open it up to board members. If board members have thoughts or comments that you want to share here with the subcommittee before this does get to the full board next month, now would be a great time. Member Smith.
I understand, so MPCA has been going through the cumulative effects process here over the last year, so it might be beneficial too to get an update on where that stands and the implications for the environmental review process through EQB, if that is being married up at all, or what that may look like. And I'm not sure if that's an update or that you have today or something that can be presented later.
Can we, well, you can respond. It sounds like this is not a work plan item, but a request for an update at.
As the guide, well, because cumulative effects is a part of the environmental review process and maybe the EAW or other guidance documents. Updates.
Sure. So as Assistant Commissioner Kolash noted, there was the giant state register notice that included, our state register edition included the cumulative impacts rule from MPCA. So I assume that they are on a timeline to continue to work on that. And normally it's sort of actually, do you have to have a hearing on that, Frank? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yes. So the public comment period ends next week. It's the 17th or the 19th, one of those days, but it's next week. And then we have a hearing on the cumulative impacts rule scheduled for September 1st.
So you'll note I put that under sort of that work on hold on packet page 12. It's something we've been tracking. There was some talk about some pilot programs that didn't end up materializing. And I hear you, and I think probably sometime towards the end of the fiscal year, we might have some updates and think about what we want to do as actual fiscal year 28 work is probably, that's my current thinking, depending on how things go. But that is on my mind of what might we have to do, cumulative impacts, cumulative potential effects. That's really big box. but yes.
Thank you.
I just checked the website. July 17th is when that public comment period was.
Any final questions or comments from ERIS members or board members? I'm not seeing any, so I want to say thank you again to Kayla and our executive director for the update. Thank you to the members for the good discussion. I think we heard some endorsements for the work that staff has laid out here. I think we also had a suggestion for not necessarily a work plan item, but continuing the updates, the informational updates on data centers. And then we know that the cumulative effects work is on the horizon, which is noted. So I think that's the feedback we'll send back to staff. Thank you. The final item on our agenda this afternoon is the general public comment period. So again, you can, for folks who are in the room, you can sign up on the in-person sheet. I don't think we have anyone in the room. I know we have some folks online who wish to make public comments, so you can raise your hands in Teams. I'll also note the instructions are up on the screen. And then I think Rebecca will call on folks. You will be able to unmute and speak online. I will, just ask, we ask people to be relatively brief with your remarks. And I think we can start with the first commenter, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. We have one person raising their hand. Their name is Paula McBee. Paula, Hazel's working on getting you to be able to unmute. You should be able to unmute by yourself right now. Let us know. You can try.
It should be working now. Is that working now?
We
Yes,
can
you
hear
can.
you, Paula. Thank you. Go ahead.
Excellent. My name is Paula McAbee, and I'm the Executive Director and Counsel for Water Legacy. And at first, I'd like to put on the record how challenging it has been for members of the public to participate in the process, and that it might be a good idea to allow public meetings to happen right after a topic so that if you have limited time and you're interested in one issue, you can just speak briefly and then go ahead with whatever else you have to do. As a law student, and that was, 40 years ago, I wrote a thesis on the Minnesota environmental process and the role of the EQB. And it's my perception that the EQB has moved away from its purpose and its mission. It was really intended to be a way of stepping outside the agencies and being driven by public members of the board and the public in order to protect people and to protect the environment, rather than be driven by the agency's mission, and particularly agencies that might be funded by the approval of projects. And I think it's really important that we remind the EQB that your role, for example, is not just to listen to DNR, but also to MDH and to the Pollution Control Agency and to tribes and to the public before making decisions. And I would just say that I looked through the packet today, and none of the comments from any of the environmental groups were even summarized. And none of the tribal comments, which were extremely thorough, detailed, analytical, had much of the science, they weren't copied. So that if someone on the board of the EQB or in the ERIS committee wanted to make their own decision about what should be done with the gas rules, they wouldn't be able to do so. And some very specific things to point out. The issues that Water Legacy and the other environmental groups had regarding location weren't just that the DNR rules were unwritten, but that many of the locations of concerns are not even within DNR's jurisdiction. They're either in legislation, they're in MDH rules, they're in issues that the MPCA is the primary regulator. And so starting out by just saying, well, we need to wait for DNR rules, that's not what we commented, and that we don't think that's what should be done. Similarly, the issue on, in the summary presented to the board today and to ERIS was that the issue with regard to size was just having to do with the number of wells, but that's not at all the case, because I looked both at the comments of the tribes and on our environmental comments. It's also an issue of the production, because the amount of gas that can be produced from one well, there's an order of magnitude between a small well and a large well. So you could have very big production from only a couple wells. And also that there's also a separate issue of how much acreage of shoreline or forest or wetlands or peatlands is going to be disturbed. And that issue wasn't even considered in deciding what's a big enough project to need an environmental assessment worksheet. And I think this is all important because initially the EQB said all these projects are new to Minnesota. They should all have environmental assessment worksheets. And that is certainly what all the environmental groups believe as well. Finally, in terms of the gas resource development projects, I don't recall seeing in any of Jesse's slides a mention of the distinction between different types of gas. The first gas resource production project that's in Minnesota's queue is a helium project. But even a helium project will also impact gases that are explosive, are flammable, and the infrastructure needed will depend on what's the gas that is going to be collected and what's done with it. So I just believe that it's important for staff to provide ERIS members and board members with more complete information rather than simply saying, we as the staff know the best. And you don't need to see what any of the tribal governments have to say, the tribal expert board that's been working on this, the conservation groups who are very concerned about pollution, and the conservation groups who've made their whole development about protecting special places. And all of those voices provided information, even though the timeline was just execrable here. And yet none of them made it into your process. And I think that has to change. And so I'm hoping that that I will say, I will ask our staff to send you copies of our comments because they weren't adequately reflected in this discussion. And maybe not all of you care, but maybe some of you do. And I hope that before the process is done in October, there's a real effort to have a dialogue with a broader number of people than is possible in this short constrained format with staff. One more comment. I'm glad I actually had to stay around through the whole work plan discussion because I would like the board and ERIS to realize that Water Legacy has been working on health impacts assessment since the Minnesota Academy of Family Physicians brought this to our attention in 2014. And it's really important that you know that what the doctors are concerned about, what the public is concerned about, what the tribes have made resolutions passed as much as by the National Congress of American Indians is not just health issues, but a health impact assessment process that is not top down from the RGU, but is based in a more community-based process that considers non-quantitative as well as quantitative information, that considers social and psychological and cultural aspects of health viewed as a whole. And the health department used to have funding from the federal government when there used to be a federal government to do some of this work. And it is very important that we make a distinction between adding a paragraph to an EAW, telling a project proponent to give their impression of health, and engaging in a health impact assessment process. And what the public and the medical community and the tribal community and many local people are asking for is the health impact assessment process, not just an additional paragraph in an EAW. So thank you so much for allowing me to say this. We will send you our written comments and really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Paula. We're a couple of things I just want to make sure the committee here is clear on, that the goal of Jesse's presentation was really to describe the legislative changes that occurred since we started the rule process, to summarize some high level or major themes of comments. It wasn't to summarize each and every comment, and then to familiarize ERIS with the process that is to be undertaken. So Paul, I think to your point, we also believe it is very important for members of this committee as well as the full board to understand the comments. I think staff has not fully digested those. That will come back in September. And I will also note the comments are posted publicly. So it is not our intent to skip over that. We were just not at that point today. So hopefully we will align to the suggestions that Paula made. And then I'll just note that obviously much more discussion to come on our work around the health impacts work. And so we will look forward to Water Legacy's engagement in that as well. So thank you. Rebecca, do we have any other commenters?
Chair, no, we don't have any other hands raised.
Okay. I'm just going to pause for one moment in case someone changes their mind. Still not seeing any. So I will again thank Paula Maccabee and Water Legacy for their comments. I will thank ERIS members and board members for the good discussion. Thank our staff for the very good presentations. And I think we are at the end of our
Chair.
agenda. Is that
Chair,
oh,
we have one
oh,
person.
okay. That's what happens when you say we do have one more person who just raised their hand. So under the wire, Rebecca, let's call on that person.
Yes, Lisa Zimmerman, you should be able to unmute now.
Hi, this is Lisa Zimmerman, and I am one of the advocates for residents here in Owatonna, Minnesota. And we've been dealing with a highway project for the last 4 to 5 years that it's been publicly available. And over those 4 to 5 years, I would like to say that the ability for the public to participate has been incredibly difficult. And that project is currently in the appeals system, but every time we turned around to try and get support for our project for when things weren't being completed accurately, the answer was always, you can appeal it at the end of the process. As residents, we don't want to have to be in the court system. It's not, it's a financial burden for residents. And so we really need some teeth in the laws that allow the public to have some rights before we reach that point so that we are able to mitigate those issues without having to bog down all of the court systems to appeal these cases. And I heard that that was one of the things that you were looking at, but I really wanted to let you guys know that that is a big impact for residents. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. We appreciate it.
Chair, we don't have any more.
Okay. Then I will renew my thanks to everyone I already thanked, and then I do think that brings us to the agenda. So, and do you have any further business for us, Executive Director Nuschler?
I do not.
Okay. Any of the committee members have any additional business? Seeing none, then this meeting is adjourned. I do not have a gavel, so I cannot gavel us out, but the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.